Okay, I am so excited, and so are you, it seems, to be talking about governance today. It's going to be a really interesting talk. We've got Larry, who's a customer, me, who has worked with AWS for a year, and a couple of years now, and we're going to be talking about how governance impacts us. So, sorry, my phone's ringing. Oh, sorry, this is awkward. Hello? There's no money in my account? Well, where did it go? I've never even heard of that subscription. How long have they been taking money out? Months? Okay, let me go and sort this out. Sorry, guys. Okay. So I didn't really get a phone call, obviously. That was a bit. But that's what we're all worried about, right? We're all worried about getting a call that we have overspent on something we weren't anticipating, that we get something called bill shock, right? Imagine that. Middle of the night, a call, you spent millions of dollars. We want to avoid that. That call is actually based on a true story that happened to me recently. I accidentally subscribed to something, and they started taking money out of my bank account. I'm sure some of you are nodding and thinking, yeah, that's happened to me before. And I didn't have any policies or governance on my own bank account to, oh, that's the next room, to correct this. I didn't have any notifications on the app. I didn't have any good visibility into my spend. I wasn't checking it regularly. And then I realized I was getting charged, and I fixed it. It was fine. But that is what today is all about, that you could have a cloud do the same thing that you weren't anticipating. So we really want control of our spend. But why do we feel that we don't have control? Well, we used to, right? For those of you who remember on-prem, we used to have this really strong finance and procurement model that managed all of our costs, right? Very stable, structured model. However, this led to pain points such as slowing down time to market and lack of innovation. And then we moved to the cloud. With the cloud, we have the agility and ability to spin up resources and tear them down in experiments, and also only pay for what we use. The challenge is when we have the balance. How do we balance these two elements? And in the real world, that looks like one side of the business trying to spin up resources quickly to make money, whilst the other are trying to come under budget. That is why having a governance model is key. So, what is the foundation of a governance model? And there are three key elements to this. The first, identify. Looking at your spend and figuring out what is going on here, what am I spending money on, who is spending it, and are there any problems? Are there any bills I wasn't expecting? It's key to know what you are looking for in this data. Remediate. Once you've seen your spend, maybe you found something wrong. How do you fix it? How do you make sure you have the documentation and the methods in place so that you can correct this immediately? And finally, prevention. A lot of governance is about identify and remediate, but the true goal is prevention, so you don't get a phone call like I did at the start of the session. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand over to Larry and Yuriy to talk about governance from a customer's point of view, and I want you to listen out for these three words, and I'll be back later for a technical demo.
All right, thank you, Steph. So now let's talk what does establishing foundation means in practice. My name is Yuriy Prydhodko, and I'm Principal Technical Account Manager at AWS Enterprise Support, and every day I work with large and complex customers and help them optimize their workloads, not only for cost, but also for security, operations, and pretty much every pillar of well-architected framework. And when we talk about practical aspects of establishing the right governance and right foundations, here are the four key elements which should be taken into account as a priority. First is enforcing the policies, or in other words, enforcing the best practices in your organization. And at policy level, make sure that you can prevent undesired state to happen in your organization with your workloads. Next is enhancing alerting and making sure that you have alerts in place for the most important cost-related KPIs, and you have notifications for the right people to actually receive them and act on those alerts, and be able to distinguish the most important stuff from the rest of the noise or hundreds of other messages that they receive every day. And once your teams receive these alerts and notifications, they should have right level of visibility. They should have right level of tooling to actually being able to dive deeper into the case and identify the root cause. And at the same time, they should have right level of visibility to be able to proactively monitor cost and usage, and also to be able to identify the spikes or some unexpected cost trends and increase. And all in all, the most important part here is putting this all in life and working on actual optimization of resources and acting on those alerts, notifications, and visibility, and putting this all in your day-to-day operations and evolving your foundations and your governance model, or in other words, enacting the change. Now, I want to ask Larry to talk about all these 4 pillars and how you approach them in Twilio, and Larry will share the challenges which they faced and how they overcome them, and I'm going to talk about the best practices and the next steps which you can take out of there. So Larry, tell us more about approach to FinOps in Twilio and how you enforce in the policies.
Hey, thanks, Yuriy. So before I'm going into these governance challenges that Twilio has experienced, what do we do at Twilio? We're really the Swiss Army knife of communications. But instead of the tiny saw and scissors, we're really packed with all the tools, APIs, et cetera, that businesses need to communicate to their customers via chat, text, and calling. My name is Larry Advey, or Fred. I'm the manager of FinOps, a practitioner just like a lot of you here. And today I want to share with you the governance successes that we've implemented at Twilio. And unlike the shirt, we're not quite in the Stone Age. So, here at Twilio, we have 4 AWS organizations today: Twilio, ZipWhip, SendGrid, and Segment. A lot of these gained through M&A. So, as you can expect, a lot of this is very challenging. There's a lot of different technologies, architectures, security, engineering, platform teams, you name it. And we have almost 1,000 accounts across 17 products. It's a lot. Visibility and governance is challenging at scale, especially with 4 different cultures. So today, Yuriy and I will be sharing and diving deeper in these 4 elements of governance together. Our first challenge is, where are we at in the world? We're a global company, communications, lots of different customers, 300,000 plus. And we need to control and understand where we're working and where we're not. So this picture shows where we are. We're not everywhere, but we're in a lot of different places. Like Steph was saying, we prevent unauthorized regions using service control policies where we don't run our operations. So SCPs are deployed, don't run here, run here. Effectively, less regions, less governance, less security, less cost overall. Really helps prevent potential opportunities or shenanigans from occurring. We're not done yet. We know where we are, but the challenge remains, what do we have and why do we have it? Solution, tagging. Metadata is the foundational for proper governance. If you don't know what you have, you can't really govern it. It can be challenging. So using SCPs, you can prevent and remediate gaps in understanding. So we're working on rolling this out internally at Twilio, but culture plays a big part with that. And I'll get to that here in a little bit. But Yuriy, can you go deeper on SCPs?
Sure, thank you, Larry. To apply and to use service control policies or SCPs effectively, first you need to establish right organizational structure. And your organization starts with management account, where you actually enable your organization, and that's the place where you enable consolidated billing and you receive your AWS invoice. And we do not recommend actually to host any workloads in a management account. Use it for administrative purposes, but restrict access to management account and don't host workloads there. For workloads themselves, you can create organizational units and structure them like folders in a way which aligned with your organizational taxonomy. So you can have organizational units for your cost centers, you can have organizational units for your types of environments like dev, test, prod, and you can have also organizational units for your systems and applications which you run. And then you can place AWS accounts where you host your workloads in each of the organizational units. And by having your different types of workloads in a separate accounts, you can actually not just only build a right security boundary and reduce the blast radius, but you can also significantly simplify your cost allocation in the future. And by having the right organizational structure, you can now granularly apply service control policies. You can have organizational units which might require less restrictive SCPs like dev or maybe sandbox accounts, and you can have service control policies which might be more restrictive for production and critical applications. And you can apply them on organizational unit level, on root level, or in every linked account level. And service control policies, they are like preventive guardrails which can deny particular API actions in certain conditions to actually prevent some actions to happen regardless of the access which your users have in each AWS accounts. And now you can use the same approach with the tag policies. You can granularly apply them on different levels or different stages here. And with tag policies, you can standardize your tag keys and tag values across your organization. So that's how you can establish this organizational structure which will enable you to combine this and find the balance between agility and the control. Is there anything missing here? There is one more thing which is very, very important when you work on establishing the right foundation. It's having audit in place and to log any change, any API action which happens in your organization across all these accounts. And that's where you can leverage integration with organizations with other services like CloudTrail and enable organizational trail in one single place. So all your audit and logging will happen in all the linked accounts, and it's very, very easy to do so. So if you don't have organizational trail enabled, I really recommend you to start with this. So in case you have some cost increase and spikes or anomalies, you can investigate, you can go and find what exactly changed, when it's changed, and who made the change. It's actually the place where FinOps meets security, and when security best practice helps in FinOps-related topics as well. Here is an example of service control policy which actually enforces the tag cost center, or in other words, as you can see, it denies run instance API action for resources like EC2 instances or EBS volumes if they don't have cost center tag specified. What else you can do with service control policies? Like Larry mentioned, you can restrict particular regions, so to run workloads only in the regions which you allow in your organization. There are many, many other use cases. You can, for example, prevent the use of old instance types, or you can prevent the use of, for example, GP2 volumes if you are in process of migration to GP3. So we will provide then the link to different examples of service control policies which you can apply, so you can have a look at what you can do with them. As for the tag policies, you can use them to standardize the tags keys and values. So with the tag policy here, you can actually define the case for your cost center tag. So you can say that I want this tag to be only in this case, in camel case, for example. So it will be aligned across your organization. And the same for the tag values. You can actually define the possible values for your tags. So for example, R&D cost center. You can spell R&D in so many different ways. So you want it to be aligned. You don't want them to deal with a lot of mapping and making sure that kind of you can catch all the possible ways your team spelled R&D. And you can start with using tag policies in read-only mode or audit mode and not enforcing them at the beginning. And you can check the compliance of your resources, compliance of your accounts according to the tag policies in Resource Explorer in AWS service. But next, what you can do, if you have really a goal to improve and increase tag coverage in your organization, you really need to enforce them. You really need to make this next step and to actually prevent this undesired state or untagged resources or not properly tagged resources to happen in your organization or to be deployed in your organization. But before enforcing the tags or tag policies, make sure that you communicate this change and you coordinate this change with rest of the teams, with your engineering teams, so they aware what is going to happen, and you drive this cultural change and you drive this goal also through educational activities. And when your engineers will start creating their resources, they might have received this kind of errors, like the text spelling is not correct or the values are not correct. So make sure that they expect this to happen, they know why it happens, and also make sure that they know what to do. And they treat it not as an issue, but rather as an opportunity to accelerate the getting faster to our goal, and also to get improvement on, like preventing the undesired state to happen. All right, that's how we establish the right foundation for organizational structure. And now, Larry, I want you to tell us more about how you improved cost alerts and how you deal with notifications.
Yes. Thank you, Yuriy. All right, so really our second challenge has been, it feels a lot like hunting and gathering. Again, we're not in the Stone Age here, so tell me when something's wrong. Identify it, right? Don't go hunting and gathering, pecking, finding, discovering things. So our solution, first part, was really to deploy AWS budgets for the FinOps teams. Using the budgets, you can establish a baseline, understand what your costs are at, get to know the costs, prevent bill shock, like Steph was saying, and work to remediate communication gaps. So we remediated it for ourselves, start to deploy it for other teams as well. These notifications about going above budget are very, very helpful. They provide the context and a cost anomaly data point. And speaking of cost anomalies, again, tell me when something's wrong, right? Identify. Don't like stumble upon it weeks later with the bill. Again, we're not in the Stone Age here. Solution, deploying AWS cost categories, cost anomalies. In doing so, when you defined a cost anomaly, you have to define what's the amount you want that for. And across 4 organizations, almost 1,000 accounts, we went with, you go with $1, $50, $100, $1,000, $1 million. You could put any value in there. We went with $100. We wanted to establish a baseline. We wanted to see minimal amounts, but also, large enough to start getting some information, getting some context back. We receive these alerts quite often. However, with that, I've got a little story to tell you. So one day, we received an alert for DynamoDB. It was a $5,000 a day charge. That's $1.8 million a year. I probably should check this out, right? So we investigated, engaged the engineers to discover what was happening. So hands up in the room. Got a little quiz for you. Who thinks this was due to testing? Like 2, okay. Was this a bug? Yeah, 2 more. A feature? A few more. Gremlins? Get more there? Okay. Sorry. So something did happen. In our discovery, we were able to determine that this was due to fraudulent activity within the SendGrid email systems. Yes, cost anomalies identified fraud within our products at Twilio. It's pretty cool, right? So working with the various teams to isolate and disable the fraudulent activity resulted in a reduction of spend. What's that look like? So looking at Cost Explorer, we can see here. The green shows when the spike happened. So shot up really high, right? $5,000 a day, you can see it's roughly higher. Then it came down after we identified, remediated, and took action. So identify, then remediate. Prevention in this is a little bit difficult, but at least we were able to take action on it and stop a fraudulent actor, which was a cool instance. So hey, Yuriy, can you go deeper on this?
Yeah, thank you, Larry. It's an amazing story, and yet another example how FinOps is close and works together with security. And please raise a hand if you use budgets in your organization. All right, that's great. And please raise a hand if you use cost anomaly detection. Amazing. If you don't, I really, really recommend you to enable both, because with the budgets, you actually can define the spending limits and receive alerts and notifications when you're about to breach the limit or already breaching it. And with cost anomaly detection, you can get notified and you can get alerts when anomalies happen, even if they stay within your budgets or spending limits. So it's very important to combine them both and use in combination to complement each other. All right, we have budgets, we have cost anomalies in place. What next we can do? How we can bring it all on the next level? For cost anomalies, by default, when you get started, you most likely enabled service cost monitor, which will monitor cost anomalies within your service spend for entire organization. And it might be enough. But what you also can do is, if you want to have more granular cost anomaly detection, for example, for particular accounts or for particular tags or cost categories, you can enable additional cost monitors for those dimensions. It's very helpful for accounts with different usage patterns, for example, like sandbox accounts, which might have also not that tight restriction and security guardrails because you want to allow your developers to innovate. But if you enable cost monitor on these sandbox accounts, you will get notified for anomalies which might be not necessarily significant across your entire organizational spend, but they might be significant within these sandbox accounts where usually you have very, very low spend and usage. For the budgets, you can use budgets not only for the cost, but you can enable budget alerts only for the usage. For example, you can use budget alerts for things like, for example, reserved instances utilization, and get notified when, for example, if you use reserved instances at organizational level, and all of a sudden one of your engineering teams decided not coordinate with you and migrate to Graviton. Ooh. And your error utilization just goes down. You want to know about it the next day or as early as possible. Or you can also track savings plan coverage. So when your on-demand starts to grow, you get notified about this immediately. And alerts are great. It's good to have them. But what is probably the most important here is being able to get right notifications in place and also to automate response as much as possible. So for example, you can use budget actions, and when your accounts hit or breach the budgets, you can apply automatically IAM policies or preventive service control policy, which we just talked about it. And I know, Larry, you have the interesting story how you tried to use it, so tell us more about it.
Yeah, so beyond just using service control policies to control regions, you can experiment with other ways, right? So there is a KB article we're sharing the link tree later on in the slides. That walks through, you can deploy a service control policy to react to a budget alert. So if you go above a certain budget amount for a AWS organization, OU, account, et cetera, you can literally shut all the resources off. So if you've got a sandbox environment or a non-production environment where you're like, I really never want this to go above X amount of dollars per day, if it goes above that due to fraud or some other reason, you can use a service control policy to shut that down immediately. Disruptive, however, but saving the money there instead. But definitely test, right? Test those before deploying to production.
Yeah, test, and yeah, that's the way how you can actually balance agility and control, right? So start using them with like sandbox accounts, or where getting automated restriction is not that critical for your business. And then another part here of this question is write notifications. You can enable notifications to be sent via email. You can also enable integration with the chatbot to send notification in the messaging tool which your engineers use every day and prefer to use, where those notifications would be visible and very easy to understand for them. So you can, through the chatbot, send notification to Slack or any other messaging tool as well. And you can also implement some advanced scenarios. You can send notifications to SNS topic, and then you can process and deploy some automated workflow to actually read these notifications and apply some automation actions which actually can be very, very custom. You can, for example, log an incident in your ticketing system, or you can get some additional data and some context and create your custom email notification with maybe some fancy disclaimers to be very catchy and easy to distinguish for your teams across the rest of the noise, the rest of the notifications they receive. There are pretty much many, many other actions which you can do with this kind of automation. So it's very, very powerful. So I really recommend you to have a look on this. All right, Larry, now let's talk about how to improve cost visibility and especially around cost ownership.
Thank you, Yuriy. So our third challenge is we cannot identify what we don't know, which makes governance just all the harder, right? So relying on existing tags, hierarchies, and other metadata to enhance resources to fill the gaps in tagging coverage can be very challenging. Especially when I discovered we only had about 60% of our resources tagged. Yes, 60%. Definitely in the Stone Age, right? The solution to that was my team, we took ownership to identify and remediate that. We started by pulling all the various different data sources we could. Spreadsheets, documents, account tags, resource tags, setting up smoke signals, et cetera. Just give me all the information I could, right? And I brought this all together in a central repository and used Airtable to do that. Next, iterating over that data set, identifying the truth. It's out there. Are these the right products, systems, business units, groupings? Does it mean the same thing today as 10 years ago? There's a lot of drift in the data, so having to work through all that, validating assumptions. So talking to people, engaging, right? All of our personas as a practitioner, checking wiki pages, scouring through Slack history, etc. Turning over all the stones. Writing it down helps. So with almost 1,000 accounts and tens of thousands of resources, this is a lot of fun. With the data scrubbed and normalized and up to date, now for some magic. So I'm a programmer at heart, computer science degree, love a new challenge, but thankfully we're not in the Stone Age anymore, so I can use AI to help me. So I use GitHub Copilot. Hey, write me a program to read the data from Airtable and create an AWS cost category for business units. And after a few hours, scrubbing through that logic, I was able to take 60% allocation to over 97%. Very cool. That helped a lot, as you can imagine. So, Yuriy, will this help with cost visibility and governance?
Yeah, it's impressive to get 97% of cost allocation. I don't know, raise a hand if you have more. Ooh. Oh, wow, the gentleman has more. Amazing. Nice. So, what is also very important is for your team, because FinOps is all about collaboration, right? So it's very important for your teams, for all your stakeholders to have visibility over the cost which they own. So not just have it as a preference of FinOps team to kind of have this knowledge about the ownership and allocation, but also share it with your teams. But reality is that not every stakeholder has even access to AWS console, right? Your maybe finance teams might not want to log into AWS console, or you don't want to grant them that access. Or some teams like product owners or engineering leads need access to data from multiple AWS accounts. And you don't want to grant them access to the management account to see all the data. Or as in Larry's case, they own 4 AWS organizations. So it means that they have 4 payer accounts. So how to consolidate the data in one place and establish this consolidated visibility for your teams. And that's what you can do. You can enable our billing and different recommendation services to deliver data from all the sources, all the payer or management accounts, or even from other cloud providers to single consolidated storage. And then you can use analytics services to query the data for your reporting, and you can use BI tools to actually visualize the data. And in BI tools, you can leverage things like row-level security to grant access for your stakeholders only to the data which they own. And you can also use all the access integrations with SSO providers in your BI tools to share access with pretty much any stakeholders. So that's how you can create this collaborative environment for data-driven decision-making. That's what FinOps is about. Please raise a hand if you use this kind of approach in your organization. Okay, I see not many people. If you want to quickly get started with this, we provide a Cloud Intelligence Dashboards framework. It's an open source framework which allows you in a matter of couple of CloudFormation templates to spin this all up, and you will get data collection enabled from multiple sources, and also you will get out of the box ready to be used sample dashboards which you can use to start actually sharing with all your stakeholders and improving cost visibility. With that, Larry, I want to ask you to tell us more how this all helped you to actually optimize, to get into practical improvements.
Thanks, Yuriy. So our last challenge, optimizing resources, where to begin across tens of thousands of resources, right? So as you can see here, we've got a picture from the Kudos dashboards of S3. S3 is easier to right size than other resources, EC2, RDS, et cetera. We started there because we got these large buckets of data, right? And they're expensive. There's not a ton of them, so it was low-hanging fruit, and it was easy for us to have conversations and look at the information to try to understand usage patterns and things. So using tools like S3 Lens, the organizational reports within S3 Lens, and the Kudos dashboards, we were able to identify buckets that had little or no lifecycle or retention policies defined on them. So there's nothing governing the active data or the retention of that data, right? These were costly and large buckets. Screenshot's just one example. So we engaged our engineering and product teams to discuss deploying policies that would fit our customers' needs. We have over 300,000 customers, so it's important that whatever we deploy, they can still access their data timely, and we also communicate to them. So I can't just go out there and think as a practitioner, like, I think it should be X, Y, and Z, right? It's very collaborative. So after a few sprints, we were able to deploy these policies, and we noticed a significant reduction in spend to the tune of about $5 million per year. These enhancements prevent further inefficiencies. And important to note, my team doesn't have access to make these changes. We had to work through engineering to make this happen, and product as well, right? Open conversation, very collaborative. So, a lot of fun, a lot of really good wins with doing this. And Steph, what do you think about this?
Thank you. So that was obviously some amazing stories from Larry, and hopefully you have taken stuff from those guys' talk that you can implement in your own accounts. Like Yuriy was saying, if you use certain methods, if you haven't started to use them, adopt them, try them out. But let's get technical, right? So as some of you may know, if you follow me online, I used to be a developer. So I wanted to come at this section with a developer kind of mindset, and I hope you guys will enjoy this part with me. So I wanted to take an example of a simple cost optimization technique and use governance to solve it, kind of like these guys did. And that optimization is use S3 lifecycle configurations to remove incomplete multi-part uploads. This woman at the front just went, oh no. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Now, implementing that is not going to have maybe the crazy, amazing savings that Larry just did, but it's a really good example of how compound savings can add up across your accounts. And I see this in almost every single one of my customers' accounts, and I'm sure all of you can hopefully take this away and implement it in yours. This also gives us a good target for my kind of governance section, so I wanted to focus on this as an example. So hands up, I know this woman knows, but hands up, who knows what these things are? Okay, about 50% of the room. All right, so let's make sure we're all on the same page. So say you have a very big object, really anything over than 100 megabytes, and you want to get it into Amazon S3. The way you do that, the most efficiently, is multi-part upload, or MPU. So you split this into smaller chunks, and you upload it into the cloud. That's great, unless some object parts make it in, and some don't. Now, that could be due to a failure or a cancellation of the upload. But these things incur costs, but they are not a full object. You can't use them, right? So how do we solve this? Well, I told you at the start, it's lifecycle configurations. These are mentioned by Larry, and these are configurations you set on a bucket, per bucket, and they move objects into different classes, or in our case, into the trash, or rubbish, as I would say from the UK. And these run every night at midnight, okay, for time preference. So how do we govern this? And I want to jump back to the phone call that we had at the start, which you will indulge me with. And of course, if I'd set up budgets or if I'd set up alerts, I would have known about that subscription a lot earlier. But I set up the subscription. Hi, I'm the problem, it's me, as Taylor Swift would say. You have to consider the human error part of this, right? So we need to account for this in governance. So I want to use this flywheel that I showed you at the start and that these guys mentioned a lot through to think about how we can solve this problem of waste of incomplete multi-part uploads, but with these governance stages. So let's do that. So number one, how do we identify? So if you don't know already, there's S3 Lens. This is a free tool that is in every one of your accounts, and you can use it at the organization level. What this does is it shows you what usage you have in S3. Very good tool. If you haven't used it, recommend it. It will be there by default in Virginia. This is actually an example of a customer account. So this is a perfect example of what happens with incomplete multi-part uploads. Something happened, there was something failing, and slowly, gradually, their bytes were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. These are terabytes, right? This is a lot of storage. Then somebody, thank God, realized, and that's why it plateaued. And they went, okay, we fixed it. Then they had to put the lifecycle policy in, and that's where they started to delete it, and now they don't have any. But they had to go and delete that. They had to go add that lifecycle policy. It wasn't there by default, and they could have saved money if they had it there from the start. The other thing with S3 Lens, there's no cost data in here. There's no actual numbers of how much you're spending. So if you want to see that, I recommend checking out Trusted Advisor. There's a check in there for this now. This is relatively new. If you have the right support level, you can see this. And this will also show you not just where you're having bytes, but what buckets actually have the lifecycle configuration on them. So go and check in your accounts, see how well you're doing. So now we've identified. How do we remediate? We all know the answer. It's a lifecycle policy. So this is a screenshot from your console. So you go in, you click it, you set it up, nice and easy, right? But we all know that's not how you make infrastructure. You use infrastructure as code, right? Hopefully nodding, everyone knows that. So that's what I suggest you use. So here I have a CloudFormation snippet. Of course, you can use whatever infrastructure as code you choose. But in here, from the lifecycle configuration, I've added 7 lines of code. And that means that any incomplete lifecycle policy bytes will be deleted after 7 days. That's it, boom, done. Just 7 lines of code. But what I really recommend you do is go and find the teams who manage this, right? Put it in so it's the default on every single bucket that you ever build in your accounts. Not just buckets that exist, but ones that will exist in the future, so you no longer have to worry about it. Because this code is reused, everybody's sharing it. So get it done at the foundational level so you don't have to chase it up anytime soon. This now kind of segues us into the prevention and what I think is a really cool part. Oh, no, I've got an error. I didn't listen to Yuriy earlier, I forgot to tag. So reminder, if you are going to use infrastructure as code, suggest people tag in there as well. But let's go on to how we remediate, prevent. We're going to use AWS config. Now, in FinOps, I don't think people talk about AWS config enough. And I think it is a really good tool that people should take more advantage of, mainly because you're probably already using it. So in this situation, we're going to be talking about 2 parts. 1, rules. These represent the desired configuration of your account, of resources in them, and if a resource is compliant, so yes, it's okay, or not compliant. Following this, you can have auto-remediation. So this can fix things for you on your behalf. And with this, you can then have continued compliance. Now, this is all well and good, but what I think is actually the coolest part is that you can make your own ones of these. I'm not sure if everybody always knew that. You can build your own rules, and you can build your own remediation, which I think is very powerful. And that's what I did. So I'm going to show you my demo in a second. But before I do, when I was actually making this slide deck, I realized that these words look very familiar, and they kind of resonate similar to the flywheel we had on earlier, which is just an accident. And so I do really think that config is a really good example of how you can use confidence. So in this demo, what I did was I created my own custom config rule to find buckets that don't have a lifecycle configuration and then also remediate it. Okay? So let's go through that. So up on the screen, you see my Amazon account. I've got my buckets, but let's see how we're doing. So if I click on a random bucket, does this have any configuration? Nope, bad Steph, don't have anything. But I have loads of buckets, and I have loads of accounts, so that's going to take me ages to go through each one of them. That's where config comes in. So I made this custom rule. So if I go into config, into my rules, I can see ones that are custom lambdas. And if I go in here, it does what I've just described, right? I've gone in and it would check for me if that configuration exists. And if I scroll down, for all S3 buckets. If I scroll down, I'll start to see my buckets, and there's that one that I just looked at that's incompliant. And it will say, yeah, this is not compliant, this is not okay. But it will also show me all the ones that are compliant, so I can see what a good job I'm doing on the other buckets. So don't take my word for it, though. Let's go look at that other one. So I chose another bucket that's on the list, go to management, there's a lifecycle configuration. Well done. But how does this actually work? Well, it said earlier, it's a Lambda function. So if we go and have a look at this Lambda function, what we can see is I've actually added the evaluation. So exactly what I just showed you before. Like I went into a bucket and I looked and see if it had the rule. And it looks like this. So I list all of my buckets and I say, what are the names of those buckets, get all the information out of it. And then I say, does it have a lifecycle policy? If it does, compliant. If it doesn't, not compliant. Simple. And then if I scroll down, there's all this other code. And there's loads and loads of stuff, and it's very busy. Don't worry. This is actually a boilerplate. I didn't write any of that. I just wrote that very small bit. And all I had to do was change the lifecycle bit, the resource part. So I'm just going to pause the demo here. So what I did was take a boilerplate Python code, added my evaluation of resources, whether they're compliant or not compliant, and then I sent that back to config, and then it shows it to me in a nice view, right? It's actually really simple when you think about it that way. But what I mentioned earlier is it's not just you that will look at those rules. It's your developers that will look at their rules. They're already looking at it. So why not alert them to this at the start in a place that they're already going to see it? So let's go back to the demo, and I'll show you how I fix these buckets. So in here, I have a remediation rule, which is basically going to add the policy in. And it's, again, very simple to do this. So all I do is I've made an SSM document, which has Python code in it. We go to that document. And when I scroll down to look at the Python, you'll probably recognize this and think, hey, this is just the same as the CloudFormation Steph showed you earlier. It's the same setup, 7 days. It's no different, really. And all I'm doing is I'm passing in the resource ID of the bucket that's not compliant to make sure that I fix it. And it's passed through in this section. I've set this to run every 24 hours, but you can also set it to run when a resource changes. And so imagine that resource, the 24 hours has happened right now, and if I go down, my actions have started. All these buckets that were not compliant, I'm now going to fix, and I'm not doing anything. What we'll see is these clocks will start to turn into ticks, and that will actually be fixing it by adding that lifecycle configuration. So if we go back to that Terraform bucket that I selected earlier, we should now see that I have a lifecycle configuration in place, which should mean that if I have any other incomplete multiple uploads in there, they will disappear after 7 days. What I wanted to do with that demo was showcase the power of config and the power you have in your businesses and in your accounts. With auto-remediation, you don't have to do anything. It was done for me, right? It's fixed. I'm no longer going to pay for those silly incomplete multiple upload bytes. And this works for this, but it also works for unattached resources. Already there are rules for elastic IPs unattached, EBS volumes unattached, and your idle load balancers. It also works for CloudWatch retention. There's a rule in there, and that's a big topic at the moment. But it also works for something else, something you might have thought of while I've been talking, something that you're like, oh, there's a power I can take advantage of. And if you do have that idea, come and speak to me after the session, because I would love to hear it. All right, now I'm just going to pass over to Larry to go through our last bit about governance and the way you use culture. And for that, make sure that you are building your foundation, you automate where you can, and you be aware of your culture, because that's the biggest driver in this. Okay.
Thank you, Steph. So after doing FinOps for several years now, I've really confirmed that culture is the most important thing of all. So within governance, right, culture really helps prevent these forest fires that we run into all the time, just like Smokey the Bear. So first step, let's enforce some policies, prevent the bad stuff. But this isn't the Stone Age. So we can't begin with using clubs to remediate. We're civilized. So instead of doing that, consider the organizational impact. What's our end state? How do we get there? How will this impact others, engineers, product, finance, customers? When are we? Are we in the Stone Age, the future, good, bad, and the ugly? So once you've thought about that, next, begin by planting the seed. So I've got thousands of engineers that I work with, product people, finance, etc. Begin conversations, share the problems, but don't push it. This is an art, not a science. Next, empathize with people. Ask for their thoughts, their opinions, and listen to everyone. Take notes, validate the assumptions, and be perceptive. Who are the detractors? Who are your potential allies? Identify those people and what they find is valuable, and build bridges. Educate where able, but again, don't push it. But finally, make recommendations. You're going to start enacting some change. Starting small to gain momentum. Obviously, lifecycle policies are pretty easy. There's some other things, right? But through these steps, you'll have a really good runway to enacting some real change. And with that, thank you.
So we have run out of time, but we knew we were going to do that because we wanted to talk to you on a big scale. So please come chat to us in the booth. We're going to be outside. Also, if you like the config rule I demoed, it's on the link tree. So have a go. Let me know what you think. And really do let me know if you have any ideas of config rules that you think should exist. But thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Thanks for watching. Check out more FinOps X 2024 content on our YouTube channel on the 2024 playlist. Support our channel by liking, subscribing, clicking the notification bell, and by leaving comments and questions for our speakers. We appreciate your support.